Hi, my name is Andrea Hunt and I work at the Calgary Wildlife Rehabilitation Society. Today we're going to talk a little bit about a Swainson's hawk that came to us just about a week ago. This Swainson's hawk had been shot and it came to us full of buckshot. So it is doing well. It is on the road to recovery. We're doing the best that we can. Some of the buckshot could be removed, but some of it is, the risks of surgery are too great for us to try to remove it, so it's just going to have to remain in the Swainson's body. Swainson's hawks migrate all the way from Argentina every year, so they do the migratory path down to Argentina and back. It's the longest migratory route of any North American raptor, so it's quite far. It is quite distressing knowing that they just came back and that one of them's already been shot. They are protected under the International Migratory Bird Act, so we hope that people will admire wildlife from afar rather than shoot it. Well, it always feels really sad for us and really senseless because there's no reason for anyone to shoot a hawk like that. I mean, it serves no useful purpose. I mean, it's not the same as hunting for food or any of that type of thing. When something's just shot and then it comes to us, it just seems cruel because that animal would have just been left to die a slow and painful death. So we are thankful when people do bring them in. It is sad for the staff, but when it's hopeful, like this Swainson's hawk has a really good chance of being rehabilitated and released, so that then we feel good and hopeful that we will be able to do some good work. Well, this owlet was just an orphaned owlet, so somebody found it without a mother, and it was orphaned and brought to us. Luckily for us, we have a permanent resident. His name is GH. He's a great horned owl. He's an old curmudgeon-y man. He doesn't like people very much, but he's very, very good with our babies. So he takes care of all of our owlets that come in. He feeds them, and he has been feeding this baby. He was feeding it within hours of it being put in with him. So he's just really going to teach this baby how to be an owl, which is great for us because part of our job is to make sure that our animals are not habituated, so that they're not imprinted on humans at all, because they have the best chance of survival in the wild when they really don't like us. It's kind of sad for people. We really want animals to really like us, but honestly, for their safety, it's best if they're afraid of us and if they treat us with extreme caution, which they should, which is exactly what we want to see. Great horned owls do very well with us, so they're a good release for us, our rehabilitation. Well, spring and summer is our busy time here at CWRS. We get a lot of babies in, a lot of orphans, and that includes ducklings and goslings, all sorts of different types of waterfowl. Sometimes the mom is trying to get them to water. Maybe she's built her nest on the other side of a busy road from water, and so she's trying to take them across the road and she gets hit by a car or something like that, and then that's how we end up with quite a number of orphans. And so we do have quite a number right now, and we expect to be getting more. Well, right now in this enclosure in particular, there's 14 eastern gray squirrels. We do receive quite a number of squirrels every single year, and they come into us anywhere from just like a week old sort of thing where they don't even have any fur to a couple of weeks old. Usually they're orphaned because people had to take down their trees or their mother got killed, and so people bring in these little squirrels. And they're actually a really good rehab for us because they do really, really well. We feed them milk until they're able to be on solids, and we're getting ready for them to be released. So we're just making sure that they're eating properly, and when they reach a healthy weight and are strong enough to sustain themselves outside in the wild, then we'll be releasing them. This baby porcupine came to us a couple of weeks ago. It was orphaned. It was just found in a park with no mother to be seen. So it was brought to us, and we're going to take care of it until it can be on its own, until we know that it can forage for food on its own and it's a healthy weight. Well, we do our best to ensure that the animals have some semblance of a natural habitat. So in her enclosure in particular, we've put quite a lot of trees. We've got like an old Christmas tree that was donated to us that we've put in there just to feel safe and to feel like it's a natural habitat for her. So those quills, they do harden within hours after the baby is born because they really do need that natural defense. They're not fast movers or anything like that, so they need a defense, and so those quills are hard within a couple of hours just to protect them. We feel really confident that she's going to be able to be released. What we're doing is we're waiting until she can be self-sustained, so she can forage for her own food, until she reaches a weight that we think is appropriate to release her. CWRS is a nonprofit charitable organization to help rehabilitate injured and orphaned wildlife. We just run entirely on donations. We don't receive any direct government funding. So it's the public that's funding us. We get money from corporations, from granting agencies, and then just from the public in general. We have this little skunk that came in a number of days ago, and he was stuck in the plastic lid of a Slurpee cup. And as you can see, he had a huge laceration that goes all the way around his shoulders and under by his neck as well, that the Slurpee cup was stuck on him. The Slurpee cup was removed, and you can see he's completely shaved as well, which needed to be done in order to get the Slurpee cup off and to see how bad his wound was. As you can see, it is pretty bad. We are going to be performing surgery on him. It's a very difficult surgery, but we are optimistic that he's going to pull through it, and it'll be a long recovery for him, but we are hopeful that he will be able to make a transition back into the wild. We do think it's an important message though for the public to say, please take care of your litter properly, put it in the proper receptacles, because wildlife don't understand what litter is, and these types of injuries happen unfortunately every day to our local wildlife. So if we want to keep them safe, we need to make sure that our litter is properly taken care of. So clearly this is a very serious situation for wildlife like this little skunk. He would have certainly died if someone hadn't found him and brought him into us. And so it is very serious, but he is a trooper, he's got a real fighting spirit to him, and so we feel hopeful that he's going to make a full recovery. CWRS is a nonprofit charitable organization to help rehabilitate injured and orphaned wildlife. So our mandate is the 3 R's: to rescue, rehabilitate, and then release animals back into the wild. Well, these little cotton-tailed rabbits came to us from Sundre. They are rabbits, not hares. Hares are the ones that we mostly see in the city here. And there is a big difference between rabbits and hares. Hares are born fully furred with their eyes open, and they can hop within hours of birth. Rabbits are born much more helpless. They're born with no fur and with their eyes closed, so their mothers really definitely have to take care of them. They're usually found in little nests or little burrows. These little guys were found in a nest on a construction site where they were going to be filling in with concrete. And so the construction workers found them and brought them to us to take care of them, to raise them until they're old enough to be released. We're very optimistic about the prognosis for these little guys. They seem to be doing really, really well, and we're very, very hopeful that they're going to be able to be released back into the wild as soon as they are adults. So these red tree squirrels came to us, like a lot of the animals that come to us, just from a caring citizen who found them orphaned and brought them in. This is our native squirrel that's found in Alberta. Unlike the eastern gray squirrels that most people are familiar with in our city, these ones are the native. The eastern gray squirrels are an invasive species that was introduced to the city. So a lot of people haven't actually seen a red tree squirrel because they kind of got pushed to the margins of the city and outside of the city when the eastern grays were introduced. So it's really interesting for people to be able to see what our native squirrel actually looks like. Well, these groundhogs are a first for us. In southern Alberta, we don't actually see groundhogs. These groundhogs came to us from Grande Prairie, which is quite far away. And it was quite a story for them to get to us actually, because they were found on a farm. Their mother had been killed by accident, and so they were orphaned and they needed to come to a rehabilitation center. We were the ones that ended up agreeing to take them. And so a trucker in Grande Prairie drove them to Sherwood Park, where our site manager drove up from Calgary to Sherwood Park to pick these little guys up and bring them to us so that we could care for them properly. They're doing wonderfully. There's 3 of them, and they're very, very sweet, quite friendly, and all the staff love them. And in terms of what we're going to be doing with them, we're going to raise them until they're adults, and then it is our goal to release them back into what their natural habitat will be. So we are going to have to take a day trip to get them back to where it's more native for them. As you can see, a groundhog is quite a lot larger than a ground squirrel. Ground squirrels are what people would call gophers around here. They're actually called Richardson ground squirrels, but people would around here call them gophers. And right now, they're almost a similar size as an adult, these little baby groundhogs that we have, but they get to be quite a lot bigger. They are in the marmot family, but they are rodent, just like our ground squirrels are, and have a lot of rodent-type behaviors. Calgary Wildlife Rehabilitation Society is a Calgary-based nonprofit charitable organization. We do have a very active volunteering program, so people who want to volunteer, we welcome their volunteer application form, which can be found on our website. We are funded almost entirely by donations from the public, and so if anyone wants to help, we do very much appreciate any donations, either of people's time or financial, to help us reach our mandate and our goals. Well, we have a baby owl that came in. It came in just within a week of it hatching. It must have been, we think it was taken out of the nest by a predator but then dropped, because it was found in the middle of an area in which there were no owl nests anywhere. So we're not sure where it came from because the nest couldn't be found. He's a little tiny great horned owl. He's very cute. We raised him, force-fed him for a little bit until he was eating a little bit better on his own, and then we put him in with our foster great horned owl, whose name is GH. He's a great foster dad. He's a super grumpy old curmudgeon-y owl that we've had for 22 years, but what he's really amazing at is fostering young owls. So he teaches them all the things that owls would need to know, need to learn from an adult, which is fantastic for us. He does a really good job of it, and we think that this owl is going to be released probably within a month or so. Well, we just received a litter of skunks, and there was 8 skunks in that litter. 5 of them were a little bit bigger, so we think they're about 2 to 3 weeks old, and 2 of them were runty, very, very small. They look like they're only about a week to 2 old. So now we have them. They're very, very small, but skunks do very well with us. So we anticipate that they're going to grow up, all of them, and be released back into the wild by the end of the summer. They do smell, but their scent glands aren't completely developed at this stage. So they can spray, but it's just a little spray. So it's not that stinky. It's not too bad. It's not nearly as bad as a full-grown skunk spray. So they can spray, but they don't tend to when they're little because we're the source of food for them. So they don't tend to spray. It's when they get a little bit older, as they start transitioning into adulthood, and we start putting them out into pens alone to eat their food alone. They don't need to be bottle fed anymore, that they start to wild up and then start spraying our stuff as often as they can. Our prognosis is very good for them. We anticipate them all of them growing up, reaching adulthood, and being released into the wild sometime this summer. Well, Quilomena, that's what we're calling her, came in last summer. She was a baby, she was an orphan, but the people who had had her before us had spent time touching her, interacting with her, feeding her by hand, and by the time she came to us, she was quite habituated. We thought we might be able to get her out of that by putting her in with 2 other porcupines that we had, and those porcupines have since been released. They released in the spring, that's this year, but she just never got out of those habituated habits and just was really interested in humans. Plus, she's very small. We're not sure why. It could be a metabolic disorder. We're still doing blood work to find out why, but she's a little bit too small and her quills haven't grown well enough for her to be releasable. So for all those reasons, we've decided to keep her and train her and put her into our education program so that other people can learn about wildlife. She eats a lot of leafy greens and some vegetables. Her favorite is broccoli. She also really likes dandelions. They're like a treat for her, a treat that we can give her without fattening her up too much. So she mostly eats leafy greens, but she also eats a lot of tree matter. So we put in trees for her. She eats bark, she eats leaves, she eats needles, that sort of thing. We're expecting her to transition easily into our education program. And if that happens, then she'll be going to schools once or twice a week, teaching kids about wildlife. So she'd be picked up by one of our educators, taken in a kennel to a school, put into some sort of contained area in the school, and then she'd be part of the education program that talks about porcupines, that talks about local wildlife, perhaps maybe about rodents as well. Well, the Calgary Wildlife Rehabilitation Society is a local nonprofit charity. We were established in 1993 with a mandate to rescue and rehabilitate injured and orphaned wildlife in Calgary and the surrounding areas. For people who are interested in getting involved, there's lots of different ways that people can help us out. One of the ways people can help us out, of course, is by donating money to our cause. Most of that money goes directly to the animal care. We have a very small administrative budget, so all that money goes directly to the care of the animals that we take in. We do take in over 2,000 animals every single year, so that's quite a lot of animals, and we're open 365 days a year. So other ways people can get involved is by volunteering with our organization. We have a very active volunteer volunteer program. People can come and help with animal care. They can do animal pickups, construction projects, education. We have a lot of different ways that people can help our organization function. This is a mule, a fawn from a mule deer. Just like the hares, fawns are left alone for very long periods of time. So sometimes they're brought in when they don't need to be brought in. In this case, our staff advised the people to bring this animal in because it had been left alone for so long that they felt that the mother wasn't coming back. So the fawn was just left on someone's driveway, actually. The mother had left it there, and the people observed it from their house all day long, and the mother just didn't come back. And so after about 24 hours, they just decided that it needed to come in to us. You can always phone us. We have a wildlife hotline. It's 403-239-2488. Anyone who's unsure of what to do if they find wildlife can always phone us, and our staff are very willing to help you decide what to do, whether that animal actually needs help or if it should just be left on its own because it's actually doing what it's supposed to do. Well, we currently have a really good representation of the corvids that are here in southern Alberta. So we have a bunch of blue jays that came in as nestlings. We've raised them they've been here for at least a month, and we expect that they're going to be gone within the next week or so. So they're still being hand-fed by the staff, and as soon as that's done, they're going to be out the door and released back into the wild. As you can see, we often put songbirds together. So these blue jays are in with robin fledglings that are also being fed. They're species that aren't enemies or get along just fine, so we often put songbirds together that can coexist harmoniously. So in this case, we've got the robins in with the blue jays. We also have a whole bunch of magpies. We get magpies every single year. A lot of people in Calgary are not necessarily that fond of magpies, but we love them. We think that they're an amazing bird, really smart, and exceptionally beautiful. I think if people would just take some time to look at them with new eyes and just see what a beautiful animal we have living right here in our city. We also have a whole bunch of crows. Once again, these came in as fledglings or nestlings. And we get a lot of birds that come in that are fledglings that people think are actually adult birds that have been injured because they can't fly yet. In the case of magpies and crows, they're almost the size of adults, but you can tell the difference. With magpies, their tail is really short. So when they're fledglings, their tail isn't as long as those adult, beautiful long tails. And with the crows, you can tell because they have blue or silver eyes. And we also have a number of ravens here. One of them came in as a juvenile, and we're just raising that one until it's old enough to be on its own. And then two other ones came in injured. One of them has like little air bubbles under the skin. It's called subcutaneous emphysema. And so we're treating that and observing them, and they're still in care, and we're waiting to see what the outcome for their recovery is going to be. Well, CWRS is a charitable organization. We don't receive any direct government funding, and so all of our funding needs to come from the public through donations, corporate sponsorships, and granting boards. Obviously, every donation counts for us. We run on a minimal budget of about $315,000 a year, and that includes everything that we do. It includes food for our animals, it includes medicine for our animals, operational costs, staffing costs. So that includes everything. So we run on a very minimal budget, relying very heavily on volunteer to help us achieve our mandate. But we always appreciate the public donating to us because that's how we survive. We have been here for 22 years, so really we're the only place in Calgary that the public can bring injured and orphaned wildlife that they find. And so we do appreciate the public coming out and supporting us and helping us to keep going for another 22 years. Alberta has a flying squirrel. A lot of people have no idea that we have a flying squirrel here in Alberta. It's called a northern flying squirrel, and they do actually live here. This one was found a little bit west of the city, brought in as an orphan. We get a flying squirrel maybe every couple of years. We don't get them every year, but every couple of years we'll get one in. They're not that common of a species, but they're quite amazing to see. I think a lot of people just have no idea that we even have these living in Alberta. And so this one came in as an orphan, and she's almost ready to go back out into the wild, so we'll be releasing her within the next 2 weeks. So this little short-tailed weasel came to us as an orphan, and it was so young that its eyes were closed, its ears were closed, and it basically had no fur. It was found on someone's driveway. Perhaps it was taken out of a burrow by a cat or some other animal, but that's just purely speculation on our part. We can't really know. All we know is that it was found without its mother and in need of care. So it was brought to us, and we bottle fed it from the time that it came in, and now it's eating solid foods and even hunting on its own. So we're anticipating releasing this little guy in the next couple of days, actually. Well, CWRS is a charitable organization, and so we do appreciate the public coming out and supporting us and helping us to keep going for another 22 years. So every single year we receive a number of golden eyes. I'd say they're probably the second most common duck species that we receive here at CWRS. So these little guys came in as orphan babies. A lot of times waterfowl get orphaned when their mothers are taking them to water. Often they get hit, the mothers get hit on their way to water, and then we're left with a whole bunch of orphans that nobody knows what to do with. Of course, they bring them to us and we raise them up. Golden eyes are prone, they're high stress animal in captivity. So they're sometimes difficult to rehab, but these guys are doing really well, and we're looking forward to releasing them in a couple of weeks. Well, these little merlins came in, they were the cutest. They were little tiny balls of fluff, little nestlings that had fallen out of their nest and needed to be cared for. So we kept them in our clinic area in our own version of a nest that we get crocheted or knitted by volunteers that bring them in. And now they're getting a lot bigger and are just about ready to be released. They're almost adults, and we're looking forward to them going back out into the wild. Well, Swainson's hawks are one of the more common hawks that we see in southern Alberta. So they migrate from Argentina every year. They get here in about May. And then starting in about June or July, we start to see the babies. So these little guys came in as nestlings. That meant they were still needed to be in the nest. They weren't old enough to fly. They were little poofy fluff balls when we got them. Now, of course, they've grown in their adult feathers. But they're still fledglings, which means they still need to be fed by us every day. They're not old enough to hunt on their own, and they're not quite flying properly. So once they get a little bit bigger, they'll probably be here for another month. And once they're a little bit bigger and have reached adulthood and maturity, then they'll be ready to be released before their migratory window, which is really important for us to make sure that these animals get out before they need to migrate back to Argentina. So they'll start migrating by the end of September, early October, and we want to make sure that they're ready to go before then. Otherwise, they would have to overwinter with us, which isn't ideal. So we feel very confident that these guys are going to be released probably at the beginning of September.
I am Jenna McFarland, and I am the Animal Care Operations Manager at Calgary Wildlife. We are a rehabilitation society and veterinary hospital for wildlife. Baby birds! It's nestling season here at Calgary Wildlife, so we normally start off with getting a lot of little baby house sparrows in. Now's the time of year where people are cleaning out their roofs and eaves and that kind of stuff, finding baby birds and scaring the parents away and then ending up with nestlings. And then we're getting some in that are almost fledging, so they're kind of coming to the end of their nestling behavior. So we have about 8 babies right now in total. We get more every day, so we'll be seeing a lot of them. And they take a lot of feeding, so we feed them every 20 minutes from sun up to sundown. But then luckily they go to sleep when the sun goes down, so we can too. So they're doing really great in our nursery in one of our incubators, and then we'll move them out to sort of older housing once they get more capable of taking care of themselves. So almost 2 weeks ago, we got in 7 goslings, freshly hatched within 1 or 2 days, that were found on the Calgary LRT tracks. So they were found by part of the Transit Patrol and brought into us, and they were completely covered in black machine grease, so the lubricants that they use for the tracks. So we treat those animals as though it was an oil spill type situation. There's a series of washing protocols that go into place, and they went through all of them, washing and rinsing, and then finally a full blow dry, and we had to do that a couple days in a row, so it was pretty intensive for those guys. They did really well, and now we have 4 more goslings that we've added to that group, so it's a happy 11 that we will introduce to one of our foster geese here. Okay. The fox came to us from down south near Lethbridge. He was originally caught in a skunk trap, The people who found him in the trap, it was a humane trap, so he was unhurt, didn't realize that he was probably old enough to be starting those first explorations outside of the den. So they found him, weren't able to find a den site, didn't see any other foxes, and they got in touch with us seeking information about proper feeding for foxes. At that time they thought he was a coyote, and we informed them that keeping those animals as pets is not only not recommended for their own health and safety, but also it is against the law. So they happily surrendered him to us, and they drove all the way up here, which was really nice of them. He's now in super great shape, and we're going to transfer him to a facility that has other foxes. They're such a social creature that it's best for them to be in groups. And you can tell already that he's a bit lonely. He really wants to play with us. He's very social. He wants to wrestle, but we want to have as little impact on him as we can. So it's hard to resist. We want to wrestle with him and give him his food and get him to play with some of the mice that we're giving him, but it's hard. We try and be pretty hands-off with them. And we're always happy to answer any questions, however silly you may think they are. We've pretty much heard everything. So yeah, give us a call, reach out to us on our website. We're here to serve the public. Long-eared owl came to us from a lovely lady who has brought us several wild animals in the past. She noticed this guy roll down her roof of her garage and hit the pavement below, and she thinks that it probably hit one of the windows higher up in the main house and rolled down there. So right now he has very limited use of his legs, which causes us to think that he has some pretty severe spinal trauma. His x-rays have showed no fractures, so that's really great. But spinal trauma tends to be one of those injuries that's kind of a long-term rehabilitation. I've noticed him making great progress over the last few days, and that is just minute amounts of increase in movement, squeezing strength with his talons. He got me good this morning. I took him for granted. So we're really happy with his progress so far, but he probably will be here for quite a long time. This guy's a bit of a mystery. He came to us after somebody found him just displaying pretty odd behavior, which is what we're continuing to see here. He just sits on the ground and doesn't really react to anyone unless he's touched. And when he is touched, he's very feisty, very aggressive, but his visual acuity is great. We've done some blood work on him, nothing terribly alarming, some signs of infection, so we've got him on some antibiotics, but physically he is intact. We just have some concerns about his neurological capacity, and that's something, again, really long-term rehabs. He's not stressed out by being in captivity. I don't know that he knows he's in captivity. He's eating quite well, maintaining his weight, so I think he'll do quite well, but we don't know what the outcome is for him yet. So the first great horned owl we got was found sitting in the middle of a road out on one of the range roads near Okotoks. So the person who found him looked around to see if there was a nest nearby or any parents swooping or anything. She looked for hours and hours and couldn't find anything. So she brought him here. He's in really good physical condition. He's quite big and strong and quite aggressive, so we think that he had been in his nest with his parents for quite a long time. He's got a lot of those learned behaviors on board, so he's doing really well. The second one, who is the smaller of the two, he actually fell out of his nest in Edworthy Park, and he fell down through the branches of a pine tree and impaled himself on a pine twig. It actually went through the webbing of his wing, which is a really superficial wound, and he was on antibiotics and he's healed up perfectly. So he's in really good shape. So he has now joined the other great horned owl, and they are now in with one of our foster parents, GH, our super old grouchy great horned owl. And he's a little trepidatious at first, but he seems to be taking to them quite well. So I have no doubt they will grow up perfectly owly and will be released in the really early fall.